Hello, my name is Danae Barkey, and I am the Executive Director of HCU Network America. I want to thank you today for joining us for our webinar, Back to School with HCU. This webinar is meant to help you navigate working with your child's teachers, school nurse, and caretakers, along with anyone else that might be considered administrative staff in a school or daycare. Oh, whoops, I got ahead of myself. So for many parents, the first time you leave a child with HCU under the care of someone else or send them off to school, it is likely to cause a lot of stress and anxiety. Just try to breathe and remember you're not alone. You're not the first parent who has gone through this. To help support you through this new chapter of raising your child with HCU, we've developed our Caretakers Guide for HCU and also our Educators Guide to HCU. Like yourself, school teachers and nurses are very busy once the school year starts. It's important for you to start these discussions well in advance. If your child is entering pre-K or kindergarten, when registering your child, let them know your child has homocystinuria and will likely need some accommodations. It is highly suggested that patients should undergo both psychoeducational and neuropsych evaluations. Usually the school social worker is the one to conduct those. Once you get your child registered, I would contact your clinic too. A nurse, a social worker, or a dietitian can also assist in writing a letter to the school. You will need to have them complete a specific form from the USDA or school district, generally called the medical statement for children with special dietary needs. Many school districts have adapted the form, but they must also match federal guidelines. And this is why I say I would first register them and then speak with your clinic. So that way you don't have them possibly fill something out that doesn't apply in this case. So once you've registered them, a lot of parents register their children in the spring, and at that time we also suggest that's when you request a meeting with the administration, be it the principal or the teacher for the following year. However, since it's August right now, we realize it would have been helpful to have this webinar back in April or May, but it's never too late to make that call. Schools are mandated to schedule a meeting with you within 3 days of your request. That is, they need to call you back and set up the meeting within 3 days, not necessarily have the meeting in 3 days. And then come prepared for the meeting. Review your resources, thoughtfully consider your child and their unique abilities, and try to anticipate where they might struggle. Parents know a lot about their child, and you should never feel like your concerns are silly when addressing a teacher. Teachers are usually very happy to have that, depending on your approach and you bring in that information. Remember, it's never too late to request these meetings. Even if your child has made it through multiple grades or is in high school and has never had a plan, you can still create one. So some of the resources that we have that are helpful to bring into these meetings is we have our HCU Network America brochure, and it just very high level highlights what homocystinuria is, the general treatment, because we don't prescribe treatment, we just talk about what is generally done in clinics, and it also talks about symptoms of homocystinuria. On our website, we also have our Educators Guide to HCU, along with our Caregivers Guide, and information on the school lunch program. Please note, though, the school lunch program does not start in most cases until elementary school, being kindergarten. All right. Explaining HCU. There's no need to overcomplicate when explaining homocystinuria. I have a tendency to do this, and then I get these funny looks. They just need to know the general point and know that it's to be taken seriously. If they would like additional resources, either have them visit our website or give them a copy of Nutricia has a book called the Temple HCU book, and when this recording goes up, that will be in the links below. So easy way to describe it is that it's genetic. Amino acids are the building blocks of protein, kind of like Legos. You need little pieces to make your building. Patients with homocystinuria can't break down the amino acid methionine that gets turned into homocysteine. This is true also for the remethylation defects. HCU treatment consists of, for classical homocystinuria, a low-protein diet, medical formula, supplements, and medication. It might vary a little bit depending on the patient. Too much protein and not taking formula can lead to possible vision impairment, behavior problems, strokes, and more. Also, when you're explaining homocystinuria, it is important for them to understand it's not an allergy, but it's just as serious and life-threatening. You don't see these adverse reactions immediately, but they still have lethal consequences over time if not followed. Also remind them that a bite of something is still too much if it's food that isn't allowed. The example I give to many people is a pork chop has 45 grams of protein. Well, 45 grams of protein might not seem a lot to a person, but when a patient's dietary allowance for protein from food is only 5 grams, that adds up. That's usually about 1 bite or about 2 bites of a pork chop. That's a lot of protein and doesn't leave them with anything else for the day. Also let them know if the child follows the diet, it will decrease their risk of symptoms. It is never a guarantee. It's just what is best practice, and for the most part, patients do not exhibit symptoms. Apart from needing a special diet, a person with homocystinuria is healthy, and to treat them as their other students. And I think this is very crucial because really we are capable as patients to do the exact same things, just with a few modifications or accommodations in the classroom. So children with HCU experience challenges at school, and sometimes you'll hear the words IEP or 504 thrown around. But what is an IEP or a 504 plan? Is one better than the other? Does my child even qualify for one of them? In a broad sense, they are both detailed plans created by schools and parents together in collaboration to outline how a student with a disability will learn. Both are intended to protect a student with a disability to ensure they are learning in the least restrictive environment. That is a very big phrase there, least restrictive environment in education. An IEP, a 504 and an IEP have unique differences, and so a little bit more about the IEP. An IEP is a way which a student qualifies for services under each plan, and here's the major differences. With an IEP, it is more difficult to qualify for special education services and receive an IEP. Both IEPs and 504s require that a student has a documented disability, but there are additional requirements beyond having a disability to receive an IEP in special education services. A student must meet criteria under one of the categories of special education. In addition to have a disability, there must be a clear data to support that disability creates an adverse impact on educational performance, and that special instruction is essential for the child to be successful. In other words, the student can have a disability yet not qualify for special education services or an IEP. Again, it is highly suggested that patients undergo both psychoeducational and neuropsych evaluations within the school. If your school is having trouble, contact your clinic. Your clinic can also set this up. So the 504 plan, it's not as difficult to get. Anyone can have a 504. To qualify for a 504 plan, a student must have a disability that affects a major life function. The disability does not have to fall into one of the 14 categories outlined by the Department of Education. It can be a mental or physical disability, and the disability has to impact a major life function. and I will get to these accommodations in the next couple of slides. Unlike an IEP, a major life function does not have to have an educational impact. So here's the differences with the IEP and the 504. And this website down here, schoolpsychologistfiles.com, has a lot of great resources if you're interested in learning more about the differences between IEPs and 504s. There's also a thing called a student health plan, and it does not provide any accommodations outside of health-related issues. So it would really only touch on formula and low-protein foods. And so if your child does not need any of the other accommodations, which we're going to talk about, this might be a good way to fit formula in during the day at school or to get the low-protein foods that your child needs. All right, so early data from the natural history shows us that patients with homocystinuria have difficult with at least one domain of executive functioning. And this is a word that gets tossed around a lot, but not everyone understands what that means because it does, it's such a huge term that includes so much. And so executive functioning lets people plan, organize, and complete a task. It is broken down into 3 areas: your working memory, cognitive flexibility, and inhibitory control, which is self-control. And the area that affects most HCU patients, or the area that they struggle with the most, is inhibitory control. So the things that you tend to see is they're fidgety, impulsive, blurts things out, speaks without reflecting, has trouble stopping actions, acts before thinking of consequences. And I laugh because in my previous life I was a school teacher. And I was a school teacher, and this is how many kindergartners are when they come in. So sometimes this is just typical child behavior, and then if you see this continue throughout school, you know, first, second, third, fourth grade, it's probably something more than just, you know, age related, because that first year of school, they're learning to sit and be part of a group and what is appropriate in the classroom setting. So some common interventions and strategies: repeat directions in his or her own word, review the rules and directions before entering situations. This is something I've always done anyways when I'm working with a large group of kids, usually with even a whole class, when you're going through a new scenario. So that way you're just not being blindsided with, you know, really goofy behavior, because no one likes that. Prepare a child for situations that require impulse control, like going into a museum and you can't touch everything, as tempting as it is. Create a voice volume scale, such as your inside voice, your outside voice, and so forth. Use hand signals or visual cues for wait or don't interrupt. I think every parent is very familiar with those. And practice delayed gratification task. Teach what to do and not what to do, and teach coping skills. And to go back to gratification, in general, this is one of the areas many children are starting to struggle with more with electronics, because everything is very instant. And so the more you can practice it, the better it is in general. So the other area that we see across all types of homocystinuria, including patients with cobalamin defects and MTHFR, are these vision issues. So some of the things that schools can do, and this is also along with that 504, is children can have extended time on test or assignments. Peer assistance with note-taking. I had that all the way through college, actually, because my vision was such an issue. Extra set of textbooks for home use. Computer-aided instruction. Sometimes this helps because it also brings in more auditory help. Large print. Low vision devices preferential seating. I always, if I had an option, sat towards the front of the classroom, many times in the very front row. Have teacher verbalize as they write. I can't reiterate, that's so important for kids anyways, because they need that, they need to see it, they need to hear it, and engage in their education too. So if they can get it in all three areas, that's the best. Do not use red or yellow, orange markers. They don't have the necessary contrast for students in audiobooks. So you can follow along and read while while listening, sorry. And so that also helps, because if the words are hard to focus on, then you know you're getting it. So the other big aspect, so we had the educational accommodations and the vision accommodations. There's also nutritional accommodations. So you need to consider how you want your child's diet to be accommodated. Federal law requires that any school accepting USDA funds must supply substitutions to the regular meal must be made for children who are unable to eat school meals because of their disability. When that need is certified by a licensed physician, this is where that note from your doctor and your medical team comes in so handy. The law also states that a family cannot be charged extra to provide substitutions on the menu. This means you pay whatever the regular cost is for the students, and I think families understand how important that is, just simply because low protein food and formula are so expensive. So they cannot charge you anything additional just because the food costs, 3 to 5 times more. Although it is required by law, the law does not provide funding, and schools must look within their own budgets to purchase these medical foods. Sometimes schools will look at their food service budget, district general funds, or to a parent-teacher organization. And many schools will just come out and tell families there's absolutely no funding available to provide meal substitutions, but that doesn't release them from the requirement. And to learn more about the school lunch program, there is information on our website. Under resources, tools, and checklist, and then the school lunch webinar is on there, as well as some slides and materials to help. In the meantime, I think that's the next slide. So with that all being said, some kids will still prefer to take their own lunch, and additional accommodations you can have added is that so your child has access to a microwave or a refrigerator. Those are just some handy ones to have on hand. There's a lot of kids that actually need access to a microwave just because of texture things, and so you're not asking a lot by needing access to a microwave for your kids' meals. This could be one in the school cafeteria or in the staff lounge. If it's in a staff lounge, the child will likely need, though, to have someone from the school staff go in with them, or will have to go in and heat it up for them. Cold lunches do not have to be boring, so you can get creative and involve your children. In addition, if you are able to get the meal plan set up with the school for the school lunch program, these are great ideas to kind of fill in that gap. And also, these are some great ideas that the school could even do too, to match some of the things that could be on their menu. You can find more examples on the webinar I previously mentioned on our website, and also some additional recipes can be found at cookforlove.org or the HCU Network America website. There's also a much more robust list of school lunch ideas, school lunch and snack ideas in the August 2019 HCU Herald found on our website. Additionally, a lot of the low-protein vendors do have recipes for their products on their sites. So some things to consider. Many times kids with HCU get left out of the food portion of celebrations, and some ways it's nice because many schools are going away from food center celebrations. But what you can do to help is to make sure that teachers communicate classroom celebrations with you. However, if things come up unexpected, I would have a stash of shelf-stable treats that can be kept in the classroom for those unexpected celebrations. There was one mom that I spoke to who a lot of the low-protein treats that you can make at home, they aren't that shelf stable. So what she did is the teacher accommodated them by keeping a cupcake, a low protein cupcake in the freezer, and then she would take it out in the morning of that day so that the child always had a treat on hand. She'd also have like Freezy Pops and things that were low in protein. So he had things that could possibly match what the other kids were having. So for formula, it's an essential part of the day in being healthy and helping your child have the best educational outcome. Many parents don't well, not many, but there are parents who don't understand the importance of formula. It keeps your child from feeling tired and hungry, and it's hard enough for us to do as an adult. And so you want your kid to be able to have access to this. It helps them feel full. It helps your child's concentration, and it gives them energy. That's really what protein does for your body, along with all these other necessary nutrients, but really protein, and that's what the formula is. It is like a protein shake with a proper amino acid blend for them. And so formula, it can be consumed at their desk, lunch, or school office, and I would really encourage you to work on finding a formula that's convenient for school. There's a lot now that come in like a juice box type container, so it doesn't look as awkward as having a shaker bottle. But, you know, now so many people are having protein shakes, it's not as odd when you do have it in a classroom. And also find a word for formula that your child feels comfortable with. Most kids don't want their formula to be referred to as formula because when they're younger, they associate it with babies. No second or third grader wants to be associated with babies. And so you could call it a shake or a milk or a protein shake. There's so many things that you could come up with, and some kids don't care if they call it formula. They just know it's part of their routine. And for food, your child will not always finish their food, and so think about how you want that managed, what is consumed. Do you want the teacher to take pictures or a food journal? It's a little bit harder to do at the school is providing your child the food to know how much is there. So usually the food journal is a better option for that, unless if you know how much they were supposed to give them in advance, so the pitcher can kind of gauge that for you too. Cold lunches, a lot of parents will say just make sure they bring everything home and nothing should be left out or thrown out. And so childcare, it's more than just daycare. Your child care tends to become an extension of your family if they aren't already. Like your child's teacher, they are with your child the majority of waking hours. You develop a close and intimate relationship with them. And unlike a school teacher, your child care schedule tends to not be as regimented. It's important for your child care system can effectively support your child, communicate with you and your child, and hopefully would take interest in their health. So some examples, but it's not limited to your grandparents, relatives, aunts, uncles, nieces and nephews, babysitters, before and after school programs, and your neighbors. I know all these people played a crucial role in me growing up, so I'm sure they do in your child's life as well. So starting childcare, this is scary for many people because this comes before school, but it can be done. Communication and planning are the most important aspects of ensuring that your daycare provider can manage your child's homocystinuria. To help your daycare provider and ensure your child's safety, the following tips may be helpful. Explain homocystinuria. It is important to be open with your daycare providers so they know your child's needs. Use lists. Provide the child's daycare facility with simple and easy to read list of what your child can and cannot eat or drink. Offer to communicate to staff. It may be helpful, may help your daycare provider. If you come to the center and talk to the staff about homocystinuria, they can help you make your child's needs be known by all who may come in contact with him or her. I would highly recommend this because with a daycare or a child care center, there is sometimes shuffling of people, and so just talking to your child's teacher might not be enough because there's usually someone who comes in and relieves that person for lunch or who opens the day and closes the day but isn't there for the core. And so it's very important that everyone that comes in contact with your child understands. And then offer to be on call. Tell your child's daycare provider that when in doubt about anything to do with your child's care, they should call you. A great place to start with this is our Caretakers Guide to HCU, which can be found under the Resources tab on our website in Tools and Checklist. So handling food and formula. So this is a little bit different for the little ones versus the school-age kids. Many parents of infants that do not have HCU prepare a one-day supply of bottles with breast milk or infant formula for daycare. So even though your infant is drinking medical formula, possibly, or a combination of formula and breast milk, you can prepare one-day supply of your formula for your child and bring it to daycare each morning. And they really won't look at you funny because this is what happens in infant rooms and even some of the older, like toddler rooms. Recording how much is consumed by an infant in a daycare is also not unusual, even when a child does not have HCU. So you will need to make sure that your provider understands the importance, though, of recording exactly how much is consumed at each feeding more precisely, or have them save the bottles so that you can determine if your child will need more medical formula at home. If your child is a little bit older and will be eating snacks and meals that you prepare at home, ask your daycare provider to monitor your child's eating and to record the amount of food your child ate that day so that you can determine how much protein was consumed. You may ask the daycare provider to send home uneaten food so that you can measure it yourself to determine how much protein is left for the day. It's a little bit easier to do, again, if you're the one providing the food. If your daycare facility provides meals or snacks, you can work with your daycare provider to feed your child according to the HCU diet. There are centers that are more accommodating than others, so it's very important that you talk about this in the very beginning because some may feel that it's just too much, and so they'll ask you to provide their food for them if they're willing to accommodate you at all. Request that one provider be responsible for your child's meal preparation. This will help ensure that one person gains the necessary experience with a low-protein diet. This is also set up for easier communication about your child's needs as they change. Usually this is not an issue for most daycare centers, having that one point of contact. And because it's usually one consistent person preparing the meals. It's usually not a bunch of people, and some even hire a company to bring in the food. Ask to receive the daycare's menu each month in advance. Posting the menu in advance is also not unusual. Schools do this as well, and will allow you to choose foods from the menu that your child can eat and decide if you need to supplement the menu with foods from home. Another recommended thing is to provide a scale to your child's daycare and measuring cups if necessary so the food can be weighed and measured. You may need to teach them how. So these are some important things I think that really go hand in hand for the caregiver-parent-child relationship, and support and communication are essential, in my opinion. It is important for everyone, the parent and the caregiver, to stay positive, and for the caregiver to treat them as any child and encourage them to drink their formula. Again, remember that a bite is still too much. That is something that really should just be reiterated down the line with everyone. There's no such thing as just a bite when it's something you should not be eating. Communicate with parents and ask questions. I think that's just a good thing to do in general. Communicate if a child eats anything they weren't supposed to. Little kids eat everything, sand, grass, you don't know, and so have them communicate anything. You can't control it all as much as you would like to. Give parents a heads up about celebrations that involve field trips that involve food. That's a very important one. I know when I was substitute teaching, I wouldn't know what I was doing for the day, and one day I got there and they were going on a field trip. Well, that completely did not work with my meal plan for the day. So from both perspectives, it's very helpful to know so you can plan accordingly. For the parents, listen to the caregiver's concerns and questions. They are legitimate, just as are your concerns and questions. Provide alternatives for celebrations or field trips. Provide advice or strategies and interventions that might help your child succeed in the environment. And let your child know they can say no. Your child is going to learn what foods they can eat and not eat, and let them know also that, you know, they can request formula. Your child will learn when they really need it. Not to say they should refuse it when they don't feel like it, but they will understand their body over time. And learn and educate. This is, again, this goes all three ways with the caregiver and parent and child. It is really important, I think, to have caretakers, especially if you have grandparents or family members or someone at your house working with your child and their food, to have them learn how to properly read food labels. It's not something that comes naturally, and our food label system here in the U.S. is a little bit confusing, so make sure they understand what exactly is a serving and what that serving relates to in terms of protein. And some families are tracking calories too, so make sure they understand that. And then from there, make sure they know how to properly weigh and measure the food. What good is a food label if they don't know how to properly weigh or measure the food? Learn what foods they can and cannot have. That does definitely come over time, and for both caretakers and for parents. And then fostering an inclusive classroom where everyone is welcome. There's a lot of books to help with this too. That are out there, and I can give suggestions if anyone has questions. And then for the parent, explain homocysteine. Again, it doesn't need to be complicated, and you can send them back to that Nutrition Temple book. Begin to include your child in preparing food and formula. Let your child measure and weigh their food, and get your child to help count their protein. And we will be working on a list that helps you learn what are some appropriate things to include your child in as they age. And for everyone should learn more about homocysteine. And if you have the opportunity to attend low protein cooking classes or events, I would highly, highly encourage it. So I'm going to unmute the lines here and see if anyone has questions. So there's also one thing I'd like to note here. So when you go back and you look at the slide, it would take too long to click back, but there on the slide about IEPs and 504 plans, a 504 plan can actually follow you into college. And I don't think a lot of parents are aware of this. And you know, some teachers, professors are very accommodating at the college level, and some are not. And so if your child does have a 504 plan set up in elementary, middle school, high school, and it could turn from an IEP to a 504 as their needs change, or vice versa. I think it is a great tool if your college is not working with you. A lot of colleges will definitely work with you on diet, especially if your child is staying in the dorms. They'll work with you for a meal plan that works to your needs. But it's just the professors that they can be hit or miss. So that 504 plan, I think it does set you up for life. So I know that's. What was that?
Is it hard to convert from IEP to 504?
Well, they're very different, and so if your child, it is, because they're very different. I would say because there is other additional things that an IEP has that you can't get in a 504 plan, and so if you're concerned about that, I would talk to your special ed team at your school and see how they could set things up for college if that's what you're thinking long term.
Yeah,
but usually usually there's additional pieces in the IEP that you can't get in the 504 that are very academically based, and that you can't get in the 504 plan itself. So I would talk to your educational team and see if there's not something they can do to kind of future-proof it for college, if that's the path. Were there any questions otherwise? Because otherwise what I'll do is I'll end the webinar, and I definitely appreciate everyone for calling in and listening. If you do have other questions, you can email us at info@hcunetworkamerica.org, and I will try to reply within 24 hours to any questions or help get you sent in a direction that can answer your questions. There are a lot of resources on our website, and the recording of this will also have a list of a bunch of the resources that I mentioned. So, again,
awesome. Thank you for all your efforts today.
Oh, you're welcome. I'm going to stop the recording, and again, thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you.